Hey, welcome, movie fans. Dimitri Panos here for Anatomy of a Movie. Please join us in hell today as we discuss Ron Howard's Inferno.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Movie fans, Dimitri Panos here for Anatomy of a Movie. And today I have, I'm very pleased. I'm working first time with a host, Emily. What is your last name, Emily? So where are you from, Emily?
Here.
You're from here.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you. We are. Okay. Thank you. Welcome, movie fans. Dimitri Panos here for Anatomy of a Movie, where please join us in hell today as we talk about Ron Howard's Inferno.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Thank you very much for joining us. Today's edition of Anatomy of a Movie, where today we're broadcasting from the seventh ring of hell as we talk about Ron Howard's adaptation of the Dan Brown book, Inferno. Today, I have a very special host. First time we've ever worked together. Please say hello to Emily Harlan.
Hi everyone. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be working with you.
I'm excited to be working with you.
Film.
Me too. So, before we get into it, where do people find you on social media?
Yes.
Support you on social media?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter and on Instagram at OMG It's MLE.
Fantastic, and then we'll remind everybody at the end of the show. So as I mentioned, we are broadcasting from the seventh ring of hell to talk about Inferno today. We always open up the show with opinions. So Emily,
Yes.
please
Yes.
do me the honors. Let's crack this thing open.
Yeah. My initial reaction to this film is that I enjoyed it. I liked how this film kept me on the edge of my seat from start to finish. As soon as the movie opened, it's like, what's happening? Why are all these people looking like, why are we in hell already? All the way into the end. So I liked that. But I do have to say that this film had a lot of holes that I think were left without the answers to them. There were a lot of times in this film where I had to kind of connect the dots for myself. I feel like as a movie viewer, I'm somebody who gives a film the benefit of the doubt,
Sure.
where I don't go, wait, that doesn't make sense. It's over. I kind of go, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's this way. So I feel like that happened a lot throughout the film. And then after really diving into the research, I did not read the books. And after seeing the reviews of people who read the books and seeing how upset they were that the ending was changed, I can understand how a lot of people were not happy with this film. And it reflects, and I think, how it was received.
Well, I'm going to go to you a little bit later on because I want to know how it ended in the books. And, I agree with you 100% about, I always try to give a movie the benefit of a doubt. I do. I rarely, if I've ever walked out of a movie, regardless of how bad it could be. I always hope that things could turn around with a plot twist or something.
Yeah.
So, and I should preface that regarding Inferno, that I read the first three of Dan Brown's books, Angels and Demons, The Da Vinci Code, and then Lost Symbol. And then Lost Symbol actually sort of kind of lost me. I found that there were parts of that book that were interesting, especially all this U.S. history about the Freemasons and things like that, and symbols that are in use even today that I never knew were part of something else. And those are always the fun of Dan Brown books, is learning that stuff that's you see every day. You just take it for granted, or you just don't. Why is that? Why is the pyramid on the dollar bill? Like all stuff like that. But then it's story-wise, it sort of lost me. So with that said, I was like wondering while watching this movie, why couldn't they have gone back to Lost Symbol? Like, that was the third book. It could have been fun in a national treasure-ish sort of way. But instead they chose Inferno. And folks, you hear me say this every now and then. the movie made me angry.
no.
You know, it felt as if it was in the seventh ring of hell for a movie. It was preposterous. I found it ludicrous plot points and twists, a setup that was so elaborate without the setup of a fake hospital and fake wounds. And it was too much work for the bad guys to do. On top of, you know, they finally got to a sequence that I was enjoying, which happened to come at the very end. It was this sort of kind of underwater sequence thing.
Right.
And then they ruined that too by it just going on forever and just becoming just stupid. You know, this business or Hollywood or the movie industry is always like, why aren't adults going to movies? I believe because of movies like this.
Yeah.
Because they just like, why? Why are you gonna? It had everything. It has adults in the movie. It could have been a far better movie. It just we all know going in, if you're adapting a book, it's going to be different from the book.
Yeah.
It's rarely is it so close to the book that there are going to be some changes. This one could have used some major changes. I would have been fine with it. I didn't read the book, but why they stuck with probably, from what I understand, the worst received of these series of books by Dan Brown, like I just don't get it.
Yeah, it did feel like this movie was completely separate from the franchise. Like, it did not feel to me like it was an extension of the Da Vinci Code or of Angels and Demons. You know, before I watched the film, I binged watched Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, thinking like, okay, I need to refresh my mind,
Sure,
because there's going to be something that's going to happen. I'm not going to understand it. You could have not seen the other two films and been completely fine with this film. Like, it felt like a completely separate movie, a completely separate franchise, and I didn't like that.
You know, it's funny. It's interesting that you say that, though, because in Ron Howard's illustrious career, and he has had an amazing career as both an actor, as a director, Eat My Dust, working for Roger Corman, Splash, Apollo 13. I mean, you look at this guy's library of work. I'm a huge fan, okay? And when you look at his movies, the one thing that he's never really done is a sequel.
Right.
You know, there's never been a sequel to Splash. There was never Night Shift, I believe, was him too. And he says the only reason why he's done these, like 3 of these stories, is because he doesn't believe they are sequels.
Right.
He believes they are episodic. Each one is their own story.
Right.
And it's not a follow-up to the previous
The
one
other
before.
ones.
And if you think about it, he did Da Vinci Code first.
Yeah.
Angels and Demons was second. Order-wise in the books, it was Angels and Demons first, Da Vinci Code, then Lost Symbol in this book.
Right.
So it's interesting that you pointed that out and thought about, because that's Ron Howard's whole thought of, I'm really not making a sequel. And I understand that. It's like, in a sense, they're very episodic, almost like James Bond.
Yeah.
You know, and they in this movie, I felt they wanted to go extravagant locations, you know. But you're right. I felt that the puzzle solving, which is to me the most fun part of this, like learning the history of Da Vinci or Angels and Demons, which had this Star Trek-ish antimatter kind of thing that we
Right.
have to find, but there's puzzle solving. This one there was no real
It didn't
puzzle
happen.
solving.
I know, that's what I think I was most disappointed about in the film, is that when they first introduced Inferno and talking about Dante's Inferno and all of the levels of hell, and I thought that we were going to really dive into that. I thought we were going to maybe dissect every layer and kind of go into detail. And I didn't feel like there was that that wasn't there at all, I felt like.
Yeah.
You know, they briefly touched on it, but I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't that puzzle solving, because that's what I enjoyed of the other two films, is like, the 4 elements and trying to figure that out and everything. And so I felt like this movie was really lacking that. And I think one of the big reasons was because they tried to introduce this whole like new world technology and new world kind of feel to the film, and I just feel like it kind of fell short a little bit.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But why don't let's get into this A little bit, because regardless of my, regardless of how much I really dislike this movie, we're not here just to bitch and moan, and you did like it a little bit more than me as well, which is fantastic. But for you, the audience too, if for whoever is online watching us, I always think that the movie-going experience is one that's better even shared, and it's even made better when you can discuss amongst the group. And they always say misery enjoys company. And when you're talking about bad movies, it's like, tell me, like, why? Sometimes I come out of a movie and I'll say, am I the only person who liked this movie, or am I the only person who hated this movie? And I always like to find, like, oh, somebody else felt the same way I did.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you feel a connection, and that's what I think movies are. One of the things that makes them so great.
Yeah.
So if you are watching us live, commiserate, celebrate together with us. Chime in, let us know what you thought. But why don't we start off a little bit about Inferno, Dante's Inferno. This is where Dan Brown's inspiration came from. And Dante is a great Italian poet of the 14th century, and he came up with this poem that sought to describe the journey of the soul toward God, with the first step being the rejection of sin. Dante himself is led through 9 circles of hell, where he sees unrepentant sinners punished by poetic justice. Fortune tellers have their heads on backwards. We see this in the movie too. Unable to see what lies ahead. Corrupt politicians with sticky fingers. It happens to be an election year this year too. Submerged in boiling tar. Wish we had some boiling tar with us today. The great punishments are reserved for Dante's greatest villains, all traitors in Satan's 3 miles to be chewed throughout eternity as Cassius and Brutus, who murdered Julius Caesar and Judas Iscariot. It's pretty heavy stuff for a journey of the soul to God.
And where was that in the film?
I don't know.
See,
I honestly don't know.
Just when you mentioned that fortune tellers, their heads on backwards, we saw that so many times in the beginning of the film, but I would not have known what that represented if I had not gone and looked for myself and researched Dante's Inferno. So
yeah, it's, and again, these are the kind of puzzles that had it been a little bit more brought to light. Like, what does this mean? Is there fortune tellings going off? And
exactly.
So, and then again, I asked at the top of the show, why did they choose this book? And there was a simple, reason. They weren't necessarily going to revisit these Robert Langdon, this Dan Brown series. Lost Symbol had come out for one reason or another. They were like, Ron Howard couldn't commit, Tom Hanks couldn't commit, and by the time everybody got together, this book, Inferno, was coming out, and Sony bought the rights to that book and said, hey, this is the one we'll make.
Yeah.
So, it was just for that. It gestated so long before,
right?
Before the last, it took a while, but this was the one that they chose to make. And, Hanks goes on to say that he believes the enduring attraction of the franchise. He goes, there's something Dan Brown has figured out. Everybody likes a good puzzle. And this is coming from Tom Hanks himself, especially one you can actually figure out the clues at one time or another to solve. These movies give that to the audience. I didn't think this one did, Tom.
I agree with you.
And he's a full bona fide star.
Yeah.
So, did you find anything regarding the production about this all coming together? Regarding Ron Howard, obviously we said, not a sequel guy, but he enjoys the series and he comes back to it because he doesn't feel that they're sequels. And that to me was probably the most interesting part of it.
Yeah, well, and I know he did say, he's quoted as saying he does not like sequels at all, like does not want to be involved with them at all, which is so funny that he's kind of wrapped up in this franchise. But I did hear that during location, production code name, this movie's production code name was Headache. So I think some people, it has different meanings maybe for some people. But, and it was the shortest film in the trilogy, I heard as well, which is, probably good for you that it wasn't,
it felt like forever.
Dragged. Yes, it did feel pretty long. But, I was Dan Brown was an executive producer of this
Yeah.
film as well. So I wonder how much he had his hands involved in this, especially since the whole ending was changed. That kind of shocked me to see that he was one of the executive producers on the film.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
That means he gets a big check too.
yeah.
You know.
Is it for him to stay quiet though and not? I really wish I could find out if he gave his okay on the changing.
You know, it's I couldn't find anything about that. And usually usually when an author, like you know, you read about it from the woman who wrote the Hunger Games and such, that they're good with, like, if it's an adaptation and they bring the author on board. Like there was, I should preface, there was a time where the author really didn't matter. They just, Hollywood would buy the book, the studio would buy the book, they'd make the
Do
movie.
whatever.
They never even would
Yeah.
bother, like, with the author. The author got paid, you know, and that's it. But more and more writers are becoming more relevant on set,
Right.
and giving notes and doing whatever. This one, I could not find a word where Dan Brown said, "Oh yeah, no, it was all good with the changes," because
Yeah.
it seems to be a common thing these days when there's an adaptation. You know, said author says, "No, I was on board with what they did," and not in this case.
No.
So let's talk about that for a second before we go back into casting. The ending was different. So
Right.
in the book,
In
ahead.
in the book, what I've heard from reviews is that the plague that has been, you know, designed by Zobrist is actually released into the air, and half or more than half of the population is affected by it, and it doesn't kill people, but it makes them infertile. So they still are able to deal with this notion of overpopulation in the world without actually killing people. So the way that I saw that people who read the book kind of perceived it as, it was almost like a humane thing to
Okay.
do. You know, yeah, when I'm reading all the reviews, I'm like, wait, what? That doesn't seem like it's, you know, right on any level, but people...
seems to take away a little bit of choice.
Exactly, yeah. But people who read the books were kind of saying that the whole message that Dan Brown had written into this book was lost with the film, and that they still, you know, didn't do anything to deal with the overpopulation that was happening. So apparently in the film, Sienna still is against Robert Langdon. She still is trying to, you know, work against him at the end, and there's all that's the same. But in the end, the plague does get released.
Right.
So that's a huge change from the ending of the book. So.
Yeah, I would say that is a change. But this in the movie, this movie makes it a grand point to say that this is going to wipe out 90% of the population. Basically, we're starting from scratch. Now, here's my problem. Like, this is a trope done and done and done. Whether it's from James Bond, Hugo Drax, that's what he wants to do, or for you know, Spy Who Loved Me. You know, the villain in that movie wanted to, you know, he wanted to wipe out the population and bring everybody under. It's a James Bond story. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna wipe out the population, and then we're gonna restart,
Yeah,
and I'm
start
gonna be
over.
ruler, and you know, we need to reconnect. So, I was having some issues with this, you know, with that issue. To me, this wasn't a commentary movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically, it was like, here are the bad guys,
Yeah.
or this is the main bad guy. He said, you know, this disease is going to get out, you know, and we have to stop, you know, like, that guy said 100 years the earth is going to be overpopulation. We have 100 years to try to figure that problem out, I was thinking. So he shouldn't take that away now, and
I thought
we got
the
100
same,
years.
I thought the same thing. They said something along the lines of like, well, do you want to sacrifice people now so you can save people in the future, you know? And it's like,
Right.
well, it's 100 years. Maybe you could figure something else
Yeah,
out.
within
Like
100
why release a plague now and just, you know, say, oh, let's take care of it now. Like you got a long time to deal with this. But
It was a little extreme.
Yeah.
Like, if he said, you know, within the next 5 years, something, I don't know. But
Yeah.
it was hard. Again, he's, you know, this guy is like a cheap a James Bond villain, as portrayed by Ben Foster in the movie. And you mentioned Sienna, played by Felicity Jones, who's getting some good work this year.
Yeah.
It's funny because for inspiration in playing this character, and this again, I found like you rarely hear this. I read the book. Most people,
did.
she read the book. Yeah, she went to the book and read the book to see what the character's like. Mostly an actor will say, "Oh, well, I went to see what a doctor would be like and how my thoughts about overpopulation would be." So I talked to political people, and no, she read the book.
Wow.
And she said throughout filming, I would keep coming back to the book for Sienna and find little clues about her backstory that I could use playing her. The book was a really good resource throughout filming, which I found to be fascinating, like a fascinating insight. Cause
I wouldn't have expected that.
yeah, sometimes they just don't read the book at all.
Yeah, I did like her for this film though, Felicity Jones. I'm a fan of hers anyway, so I was excited to see her in this film, and I thought she did a really great job. I think she's an actress who, as any really talented actor could do, is really portray things just through looks and without even saying stuff. So even in the moment when we find out that she's going against Robert Langdon, it's like you saw that coming from a mile away.
Yeah, I saw it coming from a mile away because I didn't buy her as an ER doctor. I would have bought her as an ER nurse, but I didn't buy her as a doctor. And I think they had one throwaway line that sort of explained why I might buy that. And it was something to the effect of she's a prodigy. She was wicked smart is basically it. And so she, so I was like, oh, okay, so she's like Doogie Howser to an extent. But I wasn't buying her, like, as soon as she said she was an ER doctor, instead of like, if she said she was an ER nurse, I would have been okay. I would have been, all right.
I bought her as a doctor, but I didn't, as soon as the opening of the movie happened with the locks on the hospital doors and the fact that nobody else is in the hospital other than these two doctors, that's when I kind of was like, okay, this seems a little sketchy. Like, what's going on,
Right.
But before they introduced that, when it was just her telling him you were in it, whatever her explanation was, you had a bullet wound, and I bought that until I saw the locks on the doors and all that. And then I'm like, okay, this is getting a little weird. What's happening here? So
I was buying the bullet wound to an extent until, well, who shot him and why? Like, I couldn't figure out, like, they made such an elaborate setup to indoctrinate him into their cause that I was like, that I'm sorry, that's just too much work.
Yeah.
You're setting up a fake hospital. You're setting up a fake scenario where an assassin is coming to kill you. You even set up that the assassin shoots a doctor in the hospital.
Yeah.
That's all fake. And I was like, no, that's just too much work.
Well, and that an organization exists that does that, like that you can hire somebody to plan these things for you. That it was,
yeah.
elaborate.
And then they sort of kind of double cross link. Then it's like, no, we're not here to kill you. Oh, take them off the board. And
we were gonna kill you, but now we're not anymore.
Yeah, I was what, and I was thoroughly like, what the hell? Like, okay, it's just too much work.
And even before before we get too far past this point to where I can't go back, one thing in the movie that made me go, wait, this doesn't make sense. When he's in the hospital, Langdon, and he says to Sienna, how do you know my name? And she says, well, I met you once when I was 9. And I'm like, 20 years later, you wouldn't remember somebody that you met when you were 9. Like, I don't remember anybody I met when I was 9, let alone 20 years later, So that was one of the things that kind of made me go like, wait, this seems odd. But yeah, so there were a few points in that hospital scene that were a little off.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was interesting. And then there was the whole, there was a scheme to steal Dante's death mask.
Yes.
So it's in a museum, and Langdon, along with Anastasio, what was that gentleman? Ignacio, this big lug of a guy. They just walk up to the case in a museum, slide up the back part of the case, take the mask, and pretty much leave.
Yeah.
Like, there were no alarms. There was, like, nothing.
Yeah.
That's like, you know, I've seen a Pink Panther movie, and, like, the Pink Panther diamond is encased in, like, you know, laser security. I'm like, there was no alarm set off. Or, like, if this is such
Yeah.
a precious piece artifact, like, you can't get the Mona Lisa. You can't, even in National Treasure, when they're stealing the Declaration of Independence, like, there are things to get through. And then there was this guy Ignacio, and then what the hell
What
happened to him?
Where
Where did
Ignacio?
he go?
Where are you, Ignacio?
Yeah, in a flashback, he gets bit by a snake, and I'm like, what the hell happened to him?
Yeah.
It was just like the most bizarre thing going on, and it was just, again, there were just things like going, what, there's no alarm in this museum?
Yeah.
And then he happens to know somebody, and he doesn't remember, and he's not arrested on...
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about locations, because
Okay.
these were, to me, perhaps the most fascinating
Yes.
part of this movie, as they've been in the past movies.
Yeah.
Although in this movie, I do believe that the locations were just used as locations. I didn't learn. Again, the other fun about the books and the movies is that, you know, you're learning about the Vatican.
Yeah.
You know, you're learning about these various things, or you're learning about the Louvre, something like, even as a book reader, as an audience member, you come away, go, oh yeah, that's sort of cool. I
Yeah.
never knew that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's above and beyond just taking the tour, like Dan Brown would thoroughly research his stuff. You know, so the filming kicked off in the spectacular St. Mark's Square in Venice. And as Langdon and Sienna are following clues to, I don't know how you pronounce it, Doge's Palace, or it's Doge apostrophe S. I'm gonna say Doge's.
Yeah, that
if
sounds
somebody correct me, I don't know. So St. Mark's Square, or the Piazza San Marco, is symbolic of the heart of Venice. This plaza has been used in a ton of movies. We've seen, again, I throw back to James Bond and such. The Grand St. Mark Church at one end, Campanile Bell Tower rising in the middle. You know, you get the sense of Venice. I personally, there was an overhead shot of Venice that was like, oh, that's sort of cool.
Yeah.
Because we always see Venice from the ground with its canals.
Right.
But you never see it. That shot was cool.
Yeah.
I will give it that.
Yeah, I did like that when you know, looking at cinematography and just kind of the direction of, you know, the landscape. I thought they did a pretty good job at some points throughout the film
Sure.
with showing the vastness of the cities and showing different locations, you know, in the garden scenes and the,
Right.
you know, and then when they're in the city. So I did like that.
Yeah.
I thought that was nice to see.
Yeah, and then Florence was also used. So chase sequence through Florence. This movie is a long chase sequence.
Right.
You know, so they're being chased.
Pretty much the whole
whole movie.
entire film.
Yeah, the entire film. It's either people chasing Landing or Landing chasing other people.
Yeah.
There's always a chase, but you know, going through Florence, the Grand Gardens of the Palazzo Pitti. Now, I've never been to Italy.
Me either.
Would love to.
Me too.
If anything, for the food. You know, and so, you know, the Palazzo, a huge palace back in the 15th century. And see, and these are the things, too, that it would have been nice had something happened inside these palaces that would have led them, oh, here's a clue. Did you know that the
Yeah.
Palazzo Pitti had this going on for it? Or, you know, it would have been nice had in this movie the locations led to Dante's something.
I feel like the only thing I learned about these places is that there's a lot of secret passageways.
Right.
Was pretty
A lot
much
of
the only
secret,
thing.
yeah. So, you know, they go through places like the Plaza Vecchio, and the Inferno production filmed for 4 days at the Plaza Vecchio to capture scenes of Langdon tracing his steps through the events that lead to his situation. You know, so they had a great, listen, you know, why do you do this movie? Hey, we're going back to Italy. Okay, that's fine.
Done.
Yeah, we're going to film in Budapest. Dude, never been there before. All right, it'll be a great trip. So, you know, it's, I get it. You know, you're filming, it is a free trip to Italy. They had been there before for one of the previous movies. It just, I don't know. I wished in this movie that the locations were better suited, because before the locations were part of the plot
Yeah.
to move forward. Now, I did find that they did go to Budapest too, and this I found interesting. Actually, a majority of the film was shot in Budapest. It even doubled for other cities. So several scenes in Budapest. Much of the stage work was done there. Out on location, the city's European film was able to double for the location and much of the rest of the film. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
Tax break, it's probably cheaper.
Yeah.
And let's talk about a little bit. I'm going to go back to Budapest in a second, but I want to talk about cheaper. This movie was filmed on a considerably much lower budget than the previous two. I believe that Da Vinci Code was done for $125 million. Angels and Demons was done for $150. This movie was done for $75 million.
Yeah.
So
I saw that note too, and that kind of shocked me. You think as you kind of move forward and special effects grow and things get kind of crazier, that usually your budget kind of goes up as well. So it was interesting to see that this one was a little bit lower, but maybe that's part of the reason is location and certain things that they did on that end of it.
Yeah, well, I found it very interesting. And again, movie magic. So again, regardless of whether I like a movie or not, there could be some part of movie magic that I always like to talk about. So the stealing of the death mask, going to the location of the death mask, was actually filmed in Budapest. That doubled as the Plaza Vecchio. So I always find that very interesting. There was a museum of ethnography in Budapest. Is one of Europe's Europe's largest, most important museum. So they filmed there a lot. Scenes with Langdon and Sienna being chased through St. Mark's Basilica subterranean chapel in Venice were filmed in a basement in Budapest, at Caselli Museum in Budapest. So, they did a lot, and I think that probably had a lot to do with the budget.
Yes.
So, and then we'll talk about how budget can. We'll talk about how it could affect or not affect the gross in a little bit, but I just found all this stuff about location filming and movie magic and the magic in movies of we don't know stage wherever it is, the terrifying and grotesque scenes that play through Langdon's visions. They were shot in a picturesque street in the side of Hungarian State Opera House,
right? Which is crazy. And also, one note that I found on that is that they actually used 9,000 liters of fake blood.
Yes.
And that shocked me. I thought for sure that scene, had to be, like you said, movie magic, some sort of like CGI stuff going on. But the fact that they actually used that much, 9,000 liters of fake blood made with sugar.
Yeah. I found that, again, I was thinking about that going, it was probably cheaper other than having to
That's true.
digitally
Do all
special
of that.
effect blood flowing down, steps in like a mass tsunami-ish kind of wave. So I thought about that as well. Whether or not just for budgetary reasons, maybe it just came out cheaper. Now here's something great. Did you know that the Hungarian National Museum doubled as Harvard University?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I didn't, coming from Boston, I didn't go to Harvard though. That's the thing. I went across the Charles the BU. I didn't go to Harvard, but So Budapest doubled for Boston.
Yeah.
That makes no sense to me.
That's odd.
Yeah. So I find that's, again, I just think it's just a way to utilize. All you have to do in a movie, and I just find this funny, is just put up a title card.
Yeah.
You just put up a title card and say, hey, this is upstate New York, where really you're in Canada.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's like, you tell us where we're at, and I'm going to believe it, unless, of course, you have something that's in there that says there's no way in hell. Like the Golden Gate Bridge is not in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
So, I just love that movies can.
Yeah.
That's what movies do.
Right. That's the beauty of them.
So then they even went to Istanbul. for a weekend to shoot scenes of Langdon, Sinsky, and Sims' arrival at the breathtaking Hagia Sophia. So they went to Istanbul, so they went all over. It's almost a James Bondish kind of trek through various nice places.
It kind of felt like that at some points, like a James Bond / like Bourne situation where you can't remember what's happening. And so, yeah, there were definitely little points of that throughout the film, I thought.
Yeah. So did you have anything else to add regarding production-wise, like that you had learned, or about production design, which I'm about to go into?
No, let's get into production design.
Yeah, production design. So many of the scenes set in Venice, Florence, Istanbul were shot in those cities. Some scenes were shot in Budapest, like we said, doubling for those cities. Very often a single location within the film would actually be shot over different locations in different cities. And it was Peter Wenham, who was the production designer, to make the transitions seamless. Now, again, I didn't know that I was from a lot of it in Budapest.
Yeah.
I find that when you're, again, it's a job of your team. Movies, we always say here, collaborative effort. And it's the job of your team. It's like, well, you got to make this look like Italy.
Yeah.
You have to, so there are obvious examples of his handiwork and things that we don't think of as an audience member. But if you're into production design, like transforming the Signe and the license plates on cars from Hungarian to Italian. Less obvious examples, the street lighting was very important. In Florence, catch this, the lamps have extended iron arms that extend from the walls and little lancets that are dominant. We fit shutters to the exteriors of buildings. Anyone who's been to Florence has seen that. It was very important to give that illusion.
Wow.
I found that
Yeah.
stuff, that's how extra you would have to go for detail.
Right.
To make Budapest look like Florence.
Yeah, and I guess if you're going to save money, in the long run, if that's what it takes
Sure.
to film there instead of going to Florence, which...
Yeah, absolutely. And then, another illusion Wyndham is credited for turning that ethnographical museum into the Italian space that houses Dante's death mask. He said, although filming in real space was impossible, Wyndham notes that an imagined space suited the story better than any way. In the real place, the actual mask is in a wooden cabinet with a bit of red silk behind it.
Wow.
And I'm willing to bet alarms. Alarms. I'm willing to bet that
For
there's
sure,
an alarm.
there are alarms. If there are not, you need to get alarms.
Yeah,
because
I
you
think
can see
there are
what
alarms.
happens.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet that there are alarms. So, and he goes on to say there's a lot of variety architecture in filming at Budapest.
Yeah.
One thing there, but if there's one thing it isn't, it's Italian. So, so this guy had his hands full.
Yeah.
He had his work cut out for him.
Right.
in
Yeah,
doing
it
this.
sounds
It's
like it. All
hey,
those
we're
little details.
Yeah, I mean, but that to me, again, whether I dislike a movie,
Yeah.
like those are the things to me, like, well, these people worked hard to do that. I
Yeah.
can appreciate it because it was seamless to me.
Oh yeah, I
and that's
would
not
not
one
have
thing
known.
I'd pick on.
Yeah. Oh gosh, no, I would not have known at any point that it wasn't filmed in the locations where it says it. That it took place in.
Yeah, they went extremely incredible lengths for foaming, cladding, and latexing existing marble. We painted over that and removed it after. It was like putting on a new skin. So,
Oh my goodness.
Those people who were in Budapest who got to see this,
Yeah.
that would have been fun.
Absolutely,
To see. I love when
yeah.
they make a transformation.
Yeah.
So, I think obviously they got a good tax break in Budapest, which could lead to the lower budget. They still got to go have some good Italian food
Yeah.
in Italy, and I'm sure there's great food in Budapest too.
Yeah.
What do you know?
Probably.
Some other locations, the subterranean cistern, to suit the story, the water is set. All right, so that subterranean thing.
Yeah.
Okay, this comes towards the end of the movie.
Right.
And this is where I was like going, okay, so my favorite sequence of the movie so far, like I really liked that.
Yeah.
Like that was sort of cool. They had that orchestra there.
Yeah.
The light coming up from under the water.
Right.
Like I bought, like it exists, but it seemed like a cool place to go
Oh,
and visit,
for
right?
sure. Yeah. I when I first saw all of the people there and what are they doing there, I wish they kind of went into, just for selfish reasons, went into a little
Right.
bit more detail about what concert was happening and how, who was playing there and that kind of stuff. Because I really did like that as well. I liked how they kind of made it look very, almost like eerie and like there was blood in the water,
Yes.
almost just like in the very beginning of the film, we
Right.
saw like the blood water. So I like
Right.
how they kind of tied that back together.
Yeah.
I do have to say with that sequence, the very end of that whole sequence with the box and the plague, I didn't buy that there were only 3 people there left fighting for this box. With all of the police we saw coming out, all of the people in the hazmat suits, that I did not buy.
Yeah.
That scene, I had a little bit of issues with that.
It started off, I was like going thus far, Ron
Yeah.
Howard's most visual, like I was into it. And then it just went on and it was just it just turned into pure silliness.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, good God, this is going on forever.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be. I don't, like, what...
It had me kind of like, I thought it was a nail biter there for a second, just because, the bad guy was kind of unlocking and he almost got it all the way over. And I'm sure people who read the books and saw the film thought, okay, this is how it happens. He's going to undo the box. It's going to be released, so it was a bit of a nail biter. But the whole time I'm like, out of all those police we saw, like, why is it only you 3 here fighting for this?
I think the water may have been too cold.
Yeah, probably.
people to
Nobody
jump in.
wanted to jump
I
in.
don't know.
But it looked
It
beautiful,
just-
so.
It did. I mean, that whole area.
Yeah.
And that's why I felt, oh, okay, this is at least visually
Yeah.
interesting. And we have this orchestra and, you know,
Yeah.
this is going on. And then in the background, we've got, hey, you got to stop. And, oh, I couldn't figure out, this is the other thing, too. So Sienna sets off the bomb.
Yeah.
I would have figured she would have been blown to pieces. But,
Apparently not.
oh, well,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So, there are some other fun facts
Yes.
that I found out. How about yourself? Was there anything else that you found that was interesting, whether it be about production or cinematography or editing?
Let's see if I have anything in here. I know one of the main points that I just thought was so interesting was just the liters of blood.
Yeah.
Or sorry, fake blood that were used. That one was a huge point to me that I did not expect.
Well, then you may find this interesting. So Zobrist's deadly virus, the Inferno. Okay, catch the recipe for... This is a recipe for a virus, folks. Okay? It's 40% water, 30% vegetable oil, and 30% tomato ketchup, which is 60 and 40. That's 100% right there.
Wow.
So, yeah,
That's how
tomato
you can
ketchup.
You can make a virus with
You can
tomato.
make... so, you budding filmmakers... If
Put
you
it
need-
in a bag.
Yeah, put it in a tube. It's like,
Yeah.
I got a virus right
Yeah.
here. So...
That makes sense though, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
I could visualize it now. Yeah.
So now Ron Howard enlisted the help of a philosopher and futurist, Jason Silva, to help build a harrowing YouTube video Zobrist produces to support his idea that overpopulation will lead to the human extinction. So for you people who are familiar with Jason Silva's work, Ron Howard went to him personally.
Yeah.
And again, I want to go back to Ron Howard again. I, for lack of better words, grew up with this guy from, seeing reruns of the Andy Griffith Show to Happy Days, and then watching him. Like, it was a big deal. Like when Splash came out, like I was like, this is the guy. Like, it was a
Yeah.
big deal, and I was privileged to be working at Universal when he had movies like Apollo 13,
Wow.
which is great, and The
Yeah.
Paper, and this guy has done comedy. He did Parenthood's great movie. Gung Ho, I think, is a very underrated comedy from Ron Howard. And then he does Willow.
Yeah.
This guy's career has just been amazing, and he's done it from drama to comedy to fantasy world. Even but recently, like the last really good movie I enjoyed watching that again, a very underrated movie, is a movie called Rush. That he did. It was about Formula One. It's just a fantastic, what a great character piece and drama, all with the thrill of car racing. Heart of the Sea, Phil and I, we talked about that movie. I believe Marissa was on that panel. We enjoyed the movie to an extent, but his visual style was really good, and again, another adaptation of a book.
Mm-hmm.
Changes were made. You know, you gotta buy that. You have
Yeah.
to. You have to go into a movie that's adapted from a book,
For sure.
right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, you know, to your point, I feel like with this film, this franchise, but especially this film, like you said earlier, I just feel like Hollywood kind of got their grips on it a little too tight, you know, where it just felt like there were a lot of changes were made and a lot of things kind of happened where it was like, okay, this is geared towards Hollywood. This is geared towards people that are gonna like these crazy things happening, and it takes away the message of the book, takes away the authenticity of the book, and yeah, you know, that's unfortunate because I'm a huge Ron Howard fan as well.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, this one did kind of feel a little short.
This one felt very short to me, and especially since he just recently too had to a degree good success with the Beatles documentary that he also worked with Tom Hanks. And plus, when he works with Tom Hanks, when you get these two people together, you go in expecting a higher caliber of
Greatness.
movie.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and I
you do.
have to admit that when I first heard Inferno, I did not know that it, because like I said, I have not read any of the books, so I did not know that it was an extension of the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons and all of this. So I just saw Tom Hanks, Inferno, Ron Howard, done. I'm gonna see it.
Done.
I don't even care what it's about. It's gonna be great. And then, you know, later learning, oh, okay, this is actually, you know, part of this franchise. And yeah, so you think going into this that this is going to be like an exceptional movie.
You hope with the pedigree of talent that's
Yeah.
involved. And again, I go back, you know, I talked about adults. Like, people complain there's not enough out there for adults. And yeah, I mean, you would expect that a movie where the actors, they didn't really pander. They don't pander to a younger audience. I mean, Tom Hanks is a star. You know, his love interest is, you know, now Felicity Jones, she's probably the youngest
Yeah.
in this entire cast, okay?
Right.
So you had the elements here that really could, I just say, use the title, just completely go off the page and get, you know, David Koepp too. He's a guy that has a career. He's written for Spielberg. David Koepp is a good writer. He's directed as well. I just don't. They missed the boat on this, and they could have turned, you know, a bad book into at least a good movie.
Yeah.
And at least something for the adults, for anybody. Like this could have been a great date movie.
Yeah.
You know, and suspense and action, I think, can hit all quadrants
Right.
of people, not just adults. It's PG-13 movie, so I don't know. I just felt that they sadly missed the boat. But did you know that the prop department, speaking of Dante's Mask, they made 15 of those things.
No way.
15, and they still didn't have an alarm. No, yeah, so they had 15 of ensuring they would never be caught without one. So I found that interest. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, that shocks me because I don't see why they would need 15 of them. It's not like it gets broken or shattered or something where they're going to need to replace it if they need to reshoot. But-
It's you know, they always have doubles
Yeah.
for almost everything, particularly costumes and sometimes depending on the budget.
Yeah.
You know, props that are being used in case somebody drops something. So I just found it interesting. Okay, so the scene where that assassin woman, Viantha.
Yes.
Okay, so there's this scene up in the rafters in the Hall of 500 in order to protect the agent Flooring. The special effects department manufactured a fake pool of blood made out of red silicone. So when she
Wow.
falls down,
Yeah.
that's interesting.
And can I just say on that scene, as a female who wears heels, no way are you running on beams in wedge shoes.
Yeah,
okay?
if
I'm running on beams, I'm taking my shoes off, and I'm gonna run barefoot because that kind of, when I saw her running, I'm like, what do you take your shoes off? Well, you're not gonna make it.
Yeah, that's the Jurassic World complex.
Yes,
you know?
exactly. Yeah.
So for you fashionistas out there, for you fashionistas
I'm just like,
out
it's
there-
not practical, okay?
Well, now that you're speaking fashion, for people who care about this, Langdon and Sienna were dressed in Ferragamo. Yeah, that didn't help the budget. but filming,
Yeah.
they probably got it for
Yeah,
free.
that's why they went to Budapest instead. They're like,
Now, whilst filming in Florence, the production made a donation to the Palazzo Vecchio for the restoration of the home of Dante's Mask.
Wow.
Which is, Hollywood can do good.
yes.
And whilst in Florence, Ron Howard, again, we just talked about how great he is. He was honored by the mayor and presented with keys to the city.
Wow.
In ancient times, when it was common for European towns to be ringed by walls, visiting dignitaries were presented with a key to the city gate as a gesture of trust and kindness. Today's gesture is presenting the keys in similar sentiment. So Ron Howard got the keys to the city of in Florence. I think that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, good for him.
How fun is that?
Yeah, gosh.
Thank you for
What
coming.
an honor.
Yeah, thanks for coming to Florence, and he deserves it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah.
The drone scene chasing landing in Siena through Boboli Gardens, the camera team had to deploy 2 drones, one to follow the actors, the other to film the action.
Oh.
So yeah, we had 2 things going on
Yeah, I felt like with that, it kind of felt like they were merging old world and new world
Yeah.
to an extent that we hadn't seen in the past 2 films. And I know this isn't definitely a sequel, and there are differences and stuff, but I just felt like in this film with the use of drones, and there was also a mention in there when Langdon said, I need to get a book, I need to get to a library and get a book, and Sienna said, I just use Google for that.
Right.
I felt like they were trying to kind of push this like new world idea with overpopulation and new world technology, and it felt like that's where there was kind of like this disconnect that happened for me, at least.
Yeah, drones have been flying into movies for the past year and a half, pun intended. They seem to be the new way to film
Yeah.
certain action sequences or to be chased by.
Right. Yeah.
So, I find that was, I just found it very interesting. But of course, I felt that, let's go back to Ron Howard for a minute. I felt that Ron Howard's style in this too, and here's where I was a little bit disappointed. It was a mishmash. He was trying to be old school, yet at the same time, he
Yeah.
seemed to be using like GoPro, like putting in like, there seemed to be a variety of styles he was trying to use that sort of jarred me. It sort of kind of took me out of the movie every now and then.
Yeah.
While watching this, I don't know if you felt the
Yeah,
same way.
I agree with you, and I feel like it would have been received better if maybe it was either going towards like the old school, what we're used to seeing in this franchise, that kind of filming, or completely changing over to like this new school, technology and new school, filming techniques. I felt like it, like you said, was a mix, and there was a lot of, I think, confusion, not only in storyline, but in just the way it was filmed as well.
Yeah, which would make it hard, I think, for your editor to
Yeah.
put this together. I wanted to talk, we can talk a little bit more about casting, because there were some familiar faces I felt that that was interesting. I mentioned Jurassic World earlier. So Ephraim Khan, who played Harry, he was Harry Sins, or what was his other, not Provost.
Yeah,
What,
Provost, yeah.
Which in the I guess in the book he was just known
That's
as
what they just said his
Provost,
name was, yeah. Or
So,
what he was referring
and
to.
he wasn't killed off like the way, I don't,
Yeah.
I like that actor guy.
Yes.
I enjoy watching him. Now Ben Foster too, another very talented, another very talented actor. He gets killed off within the first 10 minutes, but his presence is seen throughout via flashback,
Yeah.
which I found very interesting.
I liked that.
Yeah. Now this other gentleman, this Omar Sy.
Oh, yes.
Now, I found him very fascinating. He played Christophe Bouchard, which I guess his name is a little bit different in the book as well. He comes with a comedy background, and he was asked, there's no comedy in your role at all. He goes, yeah, it was really hard. He goes, the way I played it is I just suppressed my smile. He goes, because I smile a lot when I work,
Yeah.
and there was a lot for me to smile. I'm like, look what I'm working
Yeah.
with. And he's like, yeah, to play a tough man, I just didn't smile. And I find that funny.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's good for him. I mean, I more or less enjoyed the cast.
Mm-hmm.
It just got so. I'm trying to find out who played Ignacio, that poor guy, because he was obviously brought into the movie Ignacio, and we see him in the movie. In fact, he's the guy that takes. Again, it was so funny. Death mask, he just hides it in his coat, and they walk out of the museum.
Yeah.
And then we never see the guy. We never find out what happens to him.
Yeah, where are you, Ignacio? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, what happened, Ignacio? Ignacio is played by Gabor Umay. So go ahead, go figure. One other thing that we always talk about too is score, and I'm a big soundtrack. I love soundtracks.
Me too.
This one was done by Hans Zimmer, who's worked with Ron Howard throughout his career.
Right.
And, you know, I used to be a Hans Zimmer fan. Hans Zimmer, he's become a caricature of himself. Like, I think he feels the music in this movie, too, I found it distracting because he's going this way. Like, the other movies were purely orchestral.
Yes.
And score. And since movies like Batman versus Superman, and he's worked with this guy Junkie, please forgive me, I don't, you know, and he's trying to be, he's always been bombastic, but he can be subtle. And with a symphony, he's very good. I mean, he's done things like Inception. He's worked with Christopher Nolan. He's done the Pirates of the Caribbean soundtrack, which have, you know, really great themes to them and everything. And he's an orchestral guy. I found that the music in this movie didn't go with this movie.
Yeah.
Like he's using too much of the synthesizers, too much in your face.
Well, and
I want him to go back to what he used to do.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Hans Zimmer, and I feel like even every part of this movie, if you look at like directing, like we were talking about, and now even music, is so different from the last two films. And I feel like it's trying to bring in, like, I feel like a broken record, but trying to bring in like this new world type of scene, right?
Right.
So we're not seeing the orchestral, which I love, and, you know, just watching Angels and Demons and watching the Da Vinci Code and having that orchestral music when they're in the Vatican and in the Louvre, and in the, you know, it kind of transports you to these places where this film had more of like an electric type of feel to it. I did like, and I guess just one difference is there were a lot of moments in like the suspense, you know, if somebody was being chased or something was happening, it wasn't really like a full piece of music. It was almost just like a note, like a high pitched like note or something, which I didn't mind. I kind of liked that it kind of changed it up a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, it was definitely completely different, I thought, than the last two films. And I enjoyed the music from the last two films, so I'm sad that wasn't part of it.
Yeah, there seems to be a thing with score now transitioning away from full orchestra, which I'm really not on board with, especially with movies like this, because it can be so much richer, deeper experience. And Hans Zimmer is becoming more too like in your face, and there's nothing subtle about it. And for me, it doesn't enhance the action. It doesn't enhance suspense. It just sort of, again, it becomes a little bit jarring. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to Ron Howard again. When we look at his work, you know, Frost Nixon was a great, you know, I think an underserved movie. Cinderella Man. Then I got to also mention Backdraft. Yeah. I mean, when you look at this guy's career,
it's fantastic.
Does it just come up to, when you're doing an Inferno, does it just come up to saying, well, you know, it's a job? You know, I mean, I'm trying to think of the thought process here as to, like, why. I understand his last few movies, you know, he hasn't been that $100 million man that we always come to expect from Ron Howard. Again, I mentioned Heart of the Sea, which didn't, you know, make much wave at the box office. It just, when you're that talented of a person, like, you can look at that script. I mean, also this movie was pushed back significantly. It was supposed to come out last Christmas, if I remember correctly. It was supposed to be out like November, December. They pushed it to
Like almost a year later.
almost a year to a time
Yeah.
where it shouldn't have had any competition. And that also says something too.
Yeah.
Like, how do you, like, I didn't hear anything about reshoots or anything. They just decided to push it back a year. So they didn't want it to play in the summertime because they felt it was too crowded. Not in January, February.
Yeah.
You know, let's release this at the very beginning of November. That was something to be said.
I did find a note in here that opening weekend it generated over 50 million, but this is in 53 international markets. And so it made it Sony's second best opening in October, which was shocking to me because you look at the ratings and the reception that it got, and it's not that good.
Let's talk a little bit then about reception, about box office, because I do find this interesting. And interesting in the means that this is a studio's way. So domestically, this is, and again, I'm getting the numbers these are numbers that I got from yesterday. Okay. I can try to get. We should try to be. Should try to be a little bit current, right? So I'll work on that. But we have got. It's interesting. Foreign and the international markets. This movie is doing really huge business.
Yeah.
Like really big business, and that to me. It makes me wonder, like, were they making this for the American market? Like, did they want to? So let's take a look. So this is as of today. So this is current. So opening weekend was $14.8 million. 14.8. It came in number 2 behind the second week of a Tyler Perry Medea movie.
Oh, that's not good.
Okay. So, so we're looking at that. So domestically, as of today, $18.9 million. Now, foreign territories, as of today, 132.7.
Wow.
So our worldwide gross is 151 million plus.
Wow.
Okay. Which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Because that's 151 worldwide. International knocked it out of the park. People internationally went, whether it was to see themselves in Italy, whatever. Yeah. I just find that fascinating. And not too long ago, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who works at Fox, and he had said that they were making a sequel to that Maze Runner movie.
Oh, okay.
Which over here, no, not Maze Runner. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. The Percy Jackson.
Percy Jackson and the.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
but that
yes.
okay. So
yes.
the first movie comes out, does okay. It's like
you
guys are making a second movie. Well, it's really not for here. It's the first one was huge overseas. So they can bring in an international market, and it just makes me wonder. Was this I mean, I'm sure Universal did not expect to come in at number 2. Why would you? When you have the Tom Hanks, Ron Howard, a relatively successful series of films. The first 2 movies did really well. People seem to like them, but they couldn't have expected to come in at number 2.
Yeah.
And then you have, well, let's look at the reception of this movie. 20% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, and you know what? That shocked me a little bit just because, like I said, I did enjoy this film. So when I first started my research into it, after I already watched it, then I started the research and I saw that score and I thought, what, that can't be right. 20%? Because I liked it more than 20%. But then after seeing, diving a little bit deeper and understanding the differences and like everything we've talked about today, now I understand why that score was given.
Well, and again, folks, the conversation of movies, like, there have been times that I've come in here where I felt like I liked a movie.
Yeah.
And then after talking about it with folks and reading people's comments, then I end up going, maybe I like this movie a little bit more. And then there have been other times where I may have not been on, I may have been on the fence. And then I talk about it, I really hate the movie. This movie, what I was shocked at the low percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, 20%. And I was like, how can Ron Howard, how can that be? And then I saw the movie, and it's one of the rare times, folks, if you're a regular, we always talk about the disparity. We will talk about how we will disagree with a lot of the, like, you know, the majority of the critic scores. Like,
Yeah.
we will say, just like you did, that movie is far better than a 20%. But in this case, sort of kind of on that side. Doesn't happen often. But the Cinema Score, which is it's a polling of audience members, they gave it a B+, which to me was like, wow, okay.
See, yeah, that does not add up with 20% on Rotten Tomatoes and then a B+. If what you would think it'd be like a C-.
But again, just to give you an example, that the Tyler Perry, the
Right.
Medea Halloween movie, that's like a 22% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has an A on Cinema Score.
Wow.
So, you know, there's always another great thing is there's always the discussion of, do people pay attention to reviews? Do reviews really matter? You know, Suicide Squad's another great, you know, example of, you know, it was not a well-received movie by the critics, but the audiences went in droves, and they generally liked the movie. You know, there always seems to be that schism, but I have found within the most recent months that schism is becoming, the gap is becoming wider and wider.
Right.
We reviewed a movie last week that here on the panel we really enjoyed. It was that Ouija horror movie.
Oh.
Okay, and that got an 80%, I think it's 82% on Rotten
Wow.
Tomatoes now, C+ on Cinema Score. So a complete flip-flop
Yeah.
of, you know, it and this seems to be some weird trend. $151+ million at the box office. They're obviously going to make, you know, their money back.
Yeah.
You know, going into these upcoming weeks, you know, we have Doctor Strange, we've got this Hacksaw Ridge. All of these movies are going to be, you know,
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
it's not going to have,
Yeah.
this movie's not going to have the legs that domestically I think that they would have wanted
Yeah.
or hoped for in the past. So that's pretty much it. Folks, if you've been joining us, you know, always, again, I find that the discussion of movies, whether you're celebrating movies, like this is awesome, or whether you're commiserating about seeing a bad movie and you just want to connect with somebody, do it here, folks, on
Yes.
Anatomy of a Movie. That's what we're here for. We're here to celebrate, commiserate, to not here to just dislike. We don't dislike everything. This, for me, just happened to be one of those movies. So, any final wrap-up thoughts?
You know, I still stand by that I did overall enjoy this film more than I did not enjoy this film. I think.
Fair.
Yeah, but you know, I'm interested to see if any get made in the future. I know another book is being released soon,
Right.
so we'll see if this kind of continues. I don't know if Ron Howard's going to be connected to it or not. But I overall there were a couple questions, but I'm going to say I liked it.
I think the next book would have to be huge and very well received if they're going to go
Yeah.
forward. That's what I think. Please, again, it was tremendous to work together with you.
I know, it was so fun.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
being here and being part of Anatomy of a Movie. Again, please remind everybody how they can support you on social media.
You can find me on Instagram and on Twitter at OMG. It's MLE.
And folks, if you would please support me on Twitter. That's all I'm on, not the Instagram and all that other stuff, but it's pretty simple, at DMovies1701. So at DMovies1701, please support me. And listen, we've got hopefully great movies upcoming, including Doctor Strange, including Hacksaw Ridge,
A lot of good ones.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, La La Land. Some really good. We're going into Academy Awards season. So join us, be part of the discussion, celebrate, commiserate with us. That's what we're here for. We're not here just to review movies. We're here to open up a discussion about the
Yes.
movies and give some insight about how that movie was made. Thank you very much, as always, for joining us and giving us your time and tuning in. Until next time, so long, folks.
Bye.
Producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff. We would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.